about them Irish?
I can't take it anymore. I need a national championship.
This is the Four Horsemen Podcast.
Dylan, do you have debt?
I do.
It's like 1.3 times the amount of American debt, right?
I'm not sure the conversion, but it is expensive student debt.
Well, Dylan, if you have debt, I have the job board for you. Dwindle. It's the first job board aimed at helping solve the student loan debt crisis. Job seekers can sign up for free. They can get a free resume critique. And they start applying for jobs that will help them with the student loan crisis. If you have debt, Dwindle's the board for you. If you're a recruiter, like some of us on the podcast are, you can find job seekers there too. So what I'm asking you to do today, before you listen to this podcast, go to dwindlestudentdebt.com, post your resume, post a job, see how Dwindle can help you. They also help you connect with people who provide tuition assistance. So if you have a job and still need tuition assistance, Dwindle can help you out there. Again, that's dwindlestudentdebt.com, DWINDLE, studentdebt.com. Go dwindle down that debt. Go Irish. Beat debt.
So Notre Dame kind of takes care of Purdue. Close game leading into the fourth quarter. Scored some late points, but I do think that final scoreline was reflective of the game. And we don't have Steve with us here today, by the way, folks. He's been married and he's doing wedding stuff. So it's just me and P Wagon. What do you think of that football game? How did that go? And were you satisfied with the performance?
Well, kind of. So I've talked to a lot of people about this game. It was close, but it never felt close. And I don't know if I'm crazy in saying that.
I say that about the Toledo game, and that was the closest, and the Florida State game. But yeah, Notre Dame has a way to kind of calm you as they're playing a tight game. But I think especially for Purdue, I think you're right there.
I mean, you look at the scoreline. It was 10-3 going into halftime with points left on the board. It was 13-17 going into the third quarter. That was the closest it was. And then they scored 10 more in the fourth to pull away 27-13. It was close. It was a 2-touchdown game. They covered the spread, but it never felt like we were out of it at all because we knew what we had, and Purdue is Purdue. It's not like they're world beaters. So I was never worried about the game.
Yeah, I agree. I thought I had said from the account it was pretty much the scoreline we expected, but I felt Notre Dame played way better than Steve and I thought they would. We predicted like a 27-20 game that was bad and that we barely escaped. It was a 27-13 game that we kind of controlled the whole time. Obviously, the offense has a lot of issues. Some of it is just timing. Like you could have similar stat lines and end up scoring 35 or scoring 17. We've been a little unlucky. We've left points on the board. I think the offensive line improved, but it wasn't like we didn't have pressure on us, and it's not like Cohn did a great job dealing with that pressure. So there are holes to fix. What I like is kind of what we predicted, which would be a continuation of the defense gelling and settling in. I thought this was a phenomenal performance from the defense. Gave up some yards early, but Clark Lee's defenses did the same. I thought they were good when they needed to, and they stopped a really good passing attack. And that's what's surprising is that Purdue is a high-end offensive, or at least throwing the ball. And we limited them pretty well, and I have some theories onto why. But I was content with that performance. It's not what it should have been still. I think Notre Dame should still beat them by 3 touchdowns. But we're getting back. It's not the one game that puts us our feeling back into the college football playoff as if we had hope. But it gets us closer to there. I think we're a win against Wisconsin away from feeling like this is a playoff team again. And that's a positive sign. I needed that sign going into Wisconsin, so I knew this team had some fight in them.
And you look at the stat line for that Plummer cat. He had 187 yards, and he completed 25 of his 36 passes. 2 of them were interceptions. So of those 11 he missed, 9 were just bad balls. And then you look at Cone, he went 15-30 for 223 and 2. So he completed 50% of his balls for 223 yards. If Ian Book did that, and this is where I'm pissed off, and this is a PSA to the Notre Dame faithful or whatever you want to call them, these chicken little people. If Ian Book completed 15 passes and threw for 225 yards, they would be anointing him the second coming in Joe Theismann. Because Jack Cohn does it, and he's not mobile, they shit on this kid. I get that TB12 is the future. We can see that of how he plays, and that stiff arm being delivered in the first half was nasty. So, yes, he's the future. But Jack Cohn is Jack Cohn. He is a game manager. And if you're a Patriot fan out there, I'm not going to apologize for this statement. Tom Brady won 6 Super Bowls being a game manager. Jack Cohn is the same type of quarterback. I was talking to my best man, Chris, because I am getting married this weekend. So the Horsemen are 2 for 2 in weddings. But we were saying that Jack Cohn is going to make it to the league, maybe 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. He's going to be behind Tom Brady. He might be on the Packers staff. He might be somewhere where they don't need a mobile quarterback who can just stand there and throw. Jack Cohn can stand and throw, but as soon as you need him to do anything else, he's too tall to be as mobile as we need him to be. I still think he has lacrosse feet. I still think he's sneaky fast when he has to be. But other than that, he wants to get the ball down the field, and we could talk all about coaching with that. He wants to go vertical. He doesn't want to scramble like Ian Book did for, a 5-yard out. And I'm fine with that. We've had quarterbacks in the past who can stretch the field vertically and then say, fuck all horizontally.
So I find it interesting because I think the same subsection of fans who never gave Book credit and were the first to jump on him are the same people who are criticizing Cohn for not being Ian Book. Because what I see is a lot of criticism and a lot of early impatience. People aren't patient with Cohn. If certain people, you know what I mean? If they have that bias, they're just waiting for Cohn to miss a pass, and then it comes out. You saw that in the first game in Florida State. We ended up having a phenomenal game. You were seeing ND fans say the same thing, and it's interesting because the complaints are he's not mobile, he's not escaping. Well, Book did that, and Book also never tested the ball downfield like Cohn did. And Cohn can be more than a game manager. That's what he is. But he can be more than that because he's got a big arm and he's fairly accurate. I thought today, or last game at least, was he could have been a lot better. He missed a lot of throws I don't think he normally would have missed. 5 of them were to Kevin Austin. But I don't think he played poorly. I think he did all right. He did what was necessary. He needs to get better. The last 2 weeks have been step downs from Florida State, although Florida State has since lost to Wake Forest and Jackson State. So it's not like Florida State was maybe the big team we thought they were. Right. But Cohn needs to be better, yes, but Cohn isn't just some bum. This is a good quarterback that we have behind, lining up under center.
And so, little bat story on me, even though I don't give my government name out. I coached quarterbacks for 4 years. I was a quarterback coach. I was a kicking coach. I was an offensive specialist. It might have been high school, but football is football. With his finger, it was the middle finger on his throwing hand. Dislocating that, you're going to have swelling. So I'm not a hand doctor. Surprise to anyone who've heard me talk before. That finger is very important to throwing the ball. He still had the spiral. He did not have the control that he needed or the touch he had against Florida State or the touch he had against Toledo. When you look at that and how he was throwing, some of those either underthrown balls or overthrown balls was just because the touch wasn't there. I know this is an audio podcast, but when you throw a ball, when you're throwing down, this middle finger really provides all that spin because inherently you're coming back here. That finger puts all the spin and all the control where you want that ball to go. You can have one without the other. So it really comes down to his finger being, not good. And he dislocated it. It's going to take time to heal.
I do hope that's the case because, it was a fine performance, but it wasn't what I would have liked to seen. He has a chance, though, to, I think, take a step forward, and he'll be highly motivated for it because obviously Notre Dame's playing Wisconsin this week, his former team. That's going to be an interesting performance, and I think a lot will come down to the offensive line. I am not, and obviously we'll do the preview in a bit, but look, I'm not expecting to power run the ball against Wisconsin. This is a game where we're going to struggle to run the ball. The good news is that it's a game where we can absolutely annihilate them in the air. And I think we got to avoid getting sucked into their game because they're just better, at least offensive line. I won't say they're better in the trenches because our defensive line is ridiculously good. But the offensive line will be key, and it's key for Cone, and it's key for the running backs, and it's something that I want to see more improvement from because I feel like we're just a better offensive line away from being in the same spot we were last year with perhaps an even more explosive offense, which we've seen glimpses of. So is there anything there that you disagree with, or you kind of seen it the same way?
So I disagree with offensive line take, and it's not you. It's all three of us being on the Horseman podcast account really throws people for a loop because we all disagree at some point with each other. The offensive line's the offensive line. You're not going to you're replacing an entire NFL caliber offensive line with Jarrett Patterson, who I'm not high on at center. You have a third string tackle. I have issues with him just because his snaps suck, and I'm a former center, so there's things that I have to deal with, and I have to go to therapy for it. But you have a third string tackle. You have a guard who is good enough to play in the NFL. You have Jarrett Patterson, who's going to be probably cut from a 53-man roster when he makes it to the NFL 7th round.
He's projected to be the highest drafted center, right?
And I disagree with that because I can see things on tape. You don't snap the ball into your own ass and
that's fine. People think he's good.
I am well aware what people think, and I disagree with them. Then you have our Marshall transfer, who you haven't heard shit from because he's doing his job. No one said his name because he's doing his job. And then you have the other offensive tackle. This is a piecemealed offensive line. No one should expect them to be world beaters when you replace an entire offensive line who's in the league. So they're doing what they have to do. Would it be nice if we had, the Malik Cunningham from Louisville back there running around all over the place, Matt Corral who can throw the ball down the field but also run? Yes. But we don't have that. So you have to manage your own expectations and know what we have. And if we can't run the ball, start figuring out how to get to the outside, because obviously when we're inside those tackles, it's a problem. Unless Kyron Williams is going to beat off 8 different men to get a 51-yard touchdown, that's the only way it can happen. So we can't run inside anymore, but that's fine. Auburn won a national championship with Cam Newton, never running inside the tackles. So,
but I also think that, and perhaps you would disagree here, but I still feel like the offensive line is not playing up to their caliber. Like, I think even though, yes, we replaced a lot, they're still better than what they've been doing. Like, I still think we can get more out of this offensive line. Yeah. And I think it's improved. And obviously you're dealing with injuries, so it's tough. But I have a high standard for even this replaced offensive line for them to still be top 25. You know what I mean? If you just give me a solid pass protection, and I thought the run game got better last game too, and you noticed more holes being created for the running backs. If you just give me a little bit more, this offense will be the explosive thing we saw against Florida State. We need a little bit more from them. And when you pair that with the defense, and I thought Marcus Freeman was excellent in how he called the game, the personnel he sent out there. I loved it all. I mean, we'll get into the Four Horsemen, but there's some defensive players that played excellently, and one in particular. So do you want to go into Four Horsemen, or do you have anything else you want to say about the Purdue game?
Just quick on the Purdue game. Tommy Rees is still learning as a coach. His offense is developing, and you see he's 30 maybe. I think me and him are the same age. So with that, he's still developing as a coach, and it takes a while to develop. So I'm not worried about Tommy Rees. The offensive line is the offensive line. If we can deal with it and just get through games, I'm fine with that. I don't want these games to be one-score games going into the fourth quarter anymore. But that's what it's going to be. And if it has to be like that, 12-0 is 12-0. They don't ask you how much you won by. They only ask you how many times you won. So.
Yeah, and a perfect example is that other teams are struggling through this too, right? Clemson almost lost to Georgia Tech. Ohio State, despite ended up winning by about 19 points, they were a one-score game into the fourth quarter with Tulsa.
Yep.
Oklahoma, and yes, I get it's a rivalry game and things are a little different, but Oklahoma, who was a preseason favorite to win the national championship, struggled with Nebraska, and Nebraska really could have put that
Spencer
game to
Rattler
overtime.
also sucks as a quarterback, but that's beside the
And
point.
the most overrated Heisman hype since Matt Barkley, perhaps, 2011. So what you're really dealing with here is a lot of teams struggling in this post-COVID era of putting away teams they should beat. Ohio State would never play Tulsa that close. That's not the Ohio State we know. A lot of teams are rebuilding. Alabama arguably should have lost to Florida. Florida played phenomenally well in the second half.
Yep.
Nobody right now in college football looks good. And
Yep.
the fact that we've avoided a loss, and I said this last week, our issues are fixable. You can't fix a loss. I'm glad we're 3-0. This is the week where the money's on the line. I believe this is the second best team we'll play, and I think it's the toughest game we'll play because it's neutral site.
There's only 33 teams left in the entire nation that are undefeated. Notre Dame is one of those 33. So,
and 2 of them reside in the state of Michigan, and we know they're good for a few losses anyway.
So now, before we get into the Horsemen, and I think that's a natural segue because fuck Michigan, do want to talk to you guys about listener support. Dylan, Steve, and I take time out of our day to do these podcasts, to send off the tweets, really just to make sure you guys are informed of the comings and goings of Notre Dame football and whoever we're playing that week. So all we ask of you, take a look at our listener support tab. It is our pinned tweet on Twitter. There's a couple different levels. It's almost like a Patreon of sorts. If you like what we're doing on here, drop $1, drop $5, $10, and we'll keep putting out this content. The more the support happens, the more stuff we can do. There's some big things in the future. So just want to plug that before we get into our Horseman of the Week.
That's perfectly said. And, I know you and Steve have, careers, and I'm in law school. Like, we're busy people. So it means a lot to us to have this support, so we can keep providing high quality content. As far as 4 Horsemen go, we kind of streamlined it this week. I picked 2, P-Wagon picked 2. So P, I'll let you list your 2 guys first, and then I'll do mine.
All right. So my 2 goes without saying who they are. You know one of the 2 already. But Avery Davis, 5 catches, 120 yards and a touchdown. Had a long of 62 and averaged 24 yards a catch. Really with him being the leading receiver behind Kyron Williams, number 2 with 2 for 47. That is good for a converted QB. He is really coming into his own, and he's someone that Cohn can trust. It's almost like Book with Skoranek last year. He found someone he can trust, and he knows he's going to throw it to him. I was surprised that Michael Mayer only had 1 target for 5 yards, but I guess that was more scheme-wise. But Avery Davis stepped up where we needed him to, the big 120 yards there. And then from there, Jay Bramblett. Bramblett for Heisman. Bramblett for the Ray Guy Award. He went 7 for 298, averaged 42.6 yards a punt, 52-yard long, 2 inside the 20, 1 that backed up Purdue onto their half-inch line. He's bombing the ball, and it may be, when you look at like punt leaders in the country right now, he might not be the top punter, but he's the top punter in my head. So that's all that
in
matters
your heart.
to me. And in my heart, I love you, Jay. Your family's phenomenal. Shout out Mike and Amy. And really, he changed the game where it had to be changed. If you can get someone inside their 20, they got 80 yards to go. That's all I got. Jay, for almost 300 yards of punting's a Horseman of the Week.
Yeah, so for our listeners, Jay could shank every punt in a game, and P would still put him as one of his 4 horsemen. It's become tradition. For myself, I went with kind of more of the 2 obvious ones. I went with Kyron Williams. I didn't think he actually tore it up in the run game until he broke loose, and that kind of maybe changed people's opinions or how they perceived the game. But where Kyron was very good was in the passing game. And usually, and I know you're not a data guy, but the data would usually suggest that throwing to receivers or to running backs who act as receivers is also inefficient and yields less expected points per play. However, Kyron Williams has kind of been the exception this year. Both him and Chris Tyree, the Notre Dame running backs, have performed very well when targeted, and you saw it there on that beautiful tight window ball cone through. Side note, I got an update from like an app from like the score, and it was like, watch Kyron Williams scores a touchdown wide open, and I'm like, he wasn't wide open. That was the most covered player on the field. I feel like somebody didn't watch it. Like they just saw him running away, and they're like, oh, he was wide open. Anyway, so make sure you do your due diligence, folks, when you're working sports media. But number one horseman for me, and I legitimately think we can actually start a Heisman campaign for him now, it's Kyle Hamilton. He's got 3 picks in 3 games, essentially 4. One was called back last week. That 4th down play, I even think he took maybe a wrong angle, and he still got there and still wrapped him up. Because watching that live, I'm like, oh, Kyle missed it, and then he still gets him, and you're like, this kid is a.
He ran 10 yards in 2 seconds. It's impossibly fast.
Yeah, he's explosive. He's bulked up. He's stronger. I find he tackles. He's always been a good tackler, but I find he can lay down the hammer even better. And he's become more of a ball hawk than in the past. Like he's always been good for an interception or 2 a year. He gets his hands on the balls, or one of the corners will. That's how he got the interception this game. He's always around the ball, and it's an invaluable player to this defense. So I think we could start the Heisman candidacy because Manti Te'o, and I know you think this was the most overrated player in Notre Dame history, but he was a Heisman runner-up in large part. And people will talk about the controversy about the fake girlfriend and the grandmother dying. That's not why he was in the Heisman conversation. Like he was genuinely, and whether it was misguided or not, there was hype behind him because Notre Dame was undefeated, and when Notre Dame is the focus of college football, it's a lot easier to get into the Heisman talk. He was the captain. He was supposed to be a high draft pick, but it was the interceptions. He had 7 as a linebacker, and that's absolutely crazy. Kyle's got 3, and yes, he's playing safety, but he's doing way more than playing safety. He's also in on the tackles. He's on the 4th down stops. I think we can build a conversation for him to be the first defensive Heisman winner since, was it Charles Woodson in 97 with Michigan?
Yep.
It could be Kyle Hamilton, and maybe Kyle Hamilton has to start returning kicks, but we gotta mobilize because when Notre Dame has one single candidate, you remember 33 trucking for a few weeks, our boy Josh Adams was in the Heisman conversation because we got behind him and because Notre Dame was good. So when Notre Dame is good, whether rightfully or wrongfully, one of their players will get thrown into the Heisman discussion, and I think that is going to be Kyle Hamilton, and I think we should mobilize behind him because we can really make a push for our 8th Heisman winner.
So Kyle Hamilton is listed on a sports book that we can't name as plus 25,000 to win a Heisman. So for gamblers out there, if you bet $1 on Kyle Hamilton to win the Heisman, it would pay out 251. So he's 25,000 right now. Alternatively, if you go up the leaderboard here, our boy Jack Cohn, Jackie Heisman's plus 8,000. So that is currently where we're at there. That's $1 to win 81 and 100 to win 8,000. So you have Jack Cohn plus 8,000, Kyle Hamilton plus 25,000. So yeah,
those are good odds. I might put $1 on Kyle Hamilton tonight because we can see it, right? If Notre Dame runs the table and Kyle Hamilton has several interceptions in several notable games and he's getting draft hype, and no offensive player takes over. And that's where we're at right now, right? Spencer Rattler has not played well. Bryce Young, Alabama's been okay, but he hasn't been the Heisman hopeful. The Ohio State
Matt
kid
Corral's the only one who jumps out at me, and he's Ole Miss, and they're going to blow a couple of games down the stretch. And so
historically, you have to be on a winning team. In fact, the only Heisman winner, or almost Heisman winner on a losing team, I think would have been Joe Theismann. He finished second. So you got to be a good team to get in that Heisman conversation. And I'm not saying that's fair, but there is an aspect to that, and we know Ole Miss will trip up. And Matt Corral, all credit to him. I've been aware of him for a few years now because when I go back and look at QBR, which you don't particularly like, he's always scored well. He's always been a good quarterback, and now
Right.
we're seeing it flourish kind of in his last season there. So if no offensive player takes over, and the Michigan State kid had a good game as a running back, but that's just not something you can rely on in this day. I think Kyle Hamilton could come up the middle there and steal that narrative.
He's going to New York. We know that. And then it's just a matter of what happens once he's in New York.
Right. I don't know if that's a reference to the Giants and Jets being awful football teams and we'll draft him, or if you mean he's going to go.
That's where the Heisman ceremony is. He could also go there.
But low key, it was way funnier if we interpreted that as the Jets and the Giants suck, and he's going to be playing for one of them.
Maybe both. They'll share them. And then real quick, he had that hit on Bell ball at the end of the game that people were up in arms about, calling targeting. It wasn't targeting. It was a textbook hit. He turned away. And for him to turn away like that at the moment of impact, it was such a heads-up, smart football play. So that's all. And I hate the internet because people are going to call it targeting. The guy's not even on the injury report this week. I think a tooth went through his mouth, and he was a little concussed from bouncing his head off the ground. But other than that, he was fine. So he's playing this week. So glad he's okay. But Kyle Hamilton, great play there.
Yeah, well said. Unless there's anything else on the game, we can move over to week.
I never want to talk about Purdue again. That was too much time on them.
Yeah, and their stupid drum didn't get to go to the game, and they're a joke of a football program, and nobody at Notre Dame cares about them. All right, we're good to go. Football predictions last week. I actually didn't tabulate it. I think we all did fairly well. I'll update it on Twitter. Let's get into the fourth week of college football and the games to pick. We're starting off with an interesting noon kickoff. Missouri is going to Chestnut Hill to play the Boston College Eagles. Before I ask you who you pick, is Phil Dracovic healthy? Because I thought he took a knock.
He's done. He's out for the season, I'm hearing.
Okay, so that allows me to make my pick. I'm going Mizzou in that case. I know it'll be a northern environment, but without a quarterback, I do not trust Boston College.
So with Boston College, and this is shout out to Coach Brad Kelly. If he'll never listen this far into a podcast, but I will shout him out because he knows what he's talking about there. They do have a very good backup quarterback here. Dennis Grossel, is very good. He's athletic. He played a couple games last year. He played this season as well. He was Phil's backup. He's from St. Ives in Ohio, so he comes from a football background there. He's a stud. He was all Ohio. Really, he knows how to play football. He's the first Boston College quarterback to throw 2 touchdown passes of 50 yards or more since Matt Ryan. So he has a cannon of an arm. So for that reason, I'm going Boston College with the points and money line.
Interesting. That's a point of disagreement, but you clearly have more insider information than I do. So let's move to the next one. This is almost college football game day. Texas A&M is going to Arkansas, a ranked matchup there. How are you feeling about this game?
I don't know if I've been incepted by Arkansas Twitter or not because I have a ton of people who follow me from them. But I'm kind of in on the Razorbacks. Woo pig. I think Texas A&M is due for a bad game, and I was stupid enough to bet against Arkansas against Georgia Southern last week. They put up points even though Georgia Southern slowed the ball down. So I like Arkansas to pull the upset here, 5.5 point. I'll take the spread and money line there too. I'm going 2 underdogs here.
Well, home underdog is always a safe pick, I find. Here's my issue. I don't think Arkansas is any good. I think they beat a fairly mediocre Texas team. And I just think the Aggies are a good team. Not maybe quite as good as the ranking would suggest, but I do believe they're a top 10 to 15 team. So I'm going to take Texas A&M to win this game. I could totally see an upset, energized environment, a big game for them. But I like TAMU or whatever the acronym is for Texas A&M.
Yes.
Interesting Pac-12 game we got going on. UCLA, who was just upset by Fresno State, is traveling to Stanford to play the Tree. Stanford, of course, upset USC on the road at the Coliseum. Just a lot of interesting data points here. Who do you like in this one?
So I wasn't high on Stanford going into this year. I had them under 4.5 wins. So we're seeing how that plays out right now. But UCLA, I think they were due for a game like Fresno State. So I think they stick it to the Cardinal this week.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I think as overhyped as UCLA might have been, I still think they're kind of a top 25 team, and I think Stanford isn't. I think Stanford somehow beat USC because USC is always due for a stinker, and it's usually always Stanford early in the season. So I'm taking the Bruins to win. I can't wait for that Trojans-Bruins matchup, even though it's insignificant to the rest of the world. I think it's just interesting to see how that one's going to fly. So yeah, we're in agreement there. Interesting one down in the Big 12, or the conference formerly known as the Big 12. I don't really know the status of that area, but undefeated Kansas State is going to play undefeated Oklahoma State. Who do you like and why?
So before the season, I looked at the Big 12 and I said, who do I like here? And I like TCU overall as a contender for the Big 12. But then you look at K-State. K-State is my second team in this conference. I think they have enough to do what they have to do to win this game. Yes, they lost Skylar Thompson, so he's out with a leg injury. They may not have one of their leading wide receivers. Another one of their quarterbacks might have gone down, so they don't have a ton of quarterback depth right now, but Oklahoma State is also out Braden Johnson and Tay Martin and Desmond Jackson and Jaden Bray and Logan Carter, who's just a straight-up athlete. So they're down 3 receivers and 2 running backs. So it's going to be a low-scoring game, but I think Kansas State, just with the pedigree there, has enough to knock off Oklahoma State at Boone Pickens Stadium.
Interesting. I'm going with the home team. I like Oklahoma State. I think they're kind of flown under the radar this season. It's going to be a good game. I can totally see that going either way. I feel a little more comfortable being the home team there, and it's also the only home game I'm picking for the home team. So that brings us to our last one. North Carolina is going to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, obviously, last week almost upset Clemson. Do you think this could be another upset, especially with being at home in Atlanta, or do you like the Tar Heels?
So I'm afraid of Georgia Tech. I was watching the game the other night with Mrs. Wagon, and we're going to the ND Georgia Tech Senior Day game. And I said, holy shit, like, this team is going to be scary that day. It's going to be a war for ND. And I do think that they're a better team than what you see on paper. They're 1-2 right now. But when you look at their schedule, it was 14-8 Clemson. They beat Kennesaw State, so that's barely a game. And they lost to Northern Illinois 22-21. They're within a score for those 2 losses. They could be 3-0. The ball goes one different way on both of those plays. They're 3-0, and it's a battle against a mediocre UNC team. So I got the Ramblin' Wreck here, and I am afraid of what's going to happen on November 20th because I've never seen a game at the stadium, and I can't have it be a loss.
Well, it won't be. I'm fairly confident. Take a deep breath. I don't need you stressing out, 4 months in advance. I'm going with North Carolina. I just think better team. Georgia Tech could upset them here, but I like the Tar Heels. Is there anything else you want to talk about with regard to general college football before we head into our match preview, or are we good to go?
Just generally in college football right now, Wake Forest is a interesting team, being 3-0 right now. I don't know if it's because of the teams they played, but they are a very interesting team. And then you go to the other side of the ACC, and everyone's mediocre over there. So it's going to be a very interesting season. I would love to see Wake Forest in the ACC championship over Clemson. And then just from there, I'm not sure if you all talked about it yet, but the new conference alignments, I don't like them. I don't love Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. I think it's bad for college football. I think conferences are bad for college football. But finally, the last point I want to make here is my South Alabama Jaguars out of the Sun Belt, are 3-0, and they are rolling right now. They beat Southern Miss 31-7, Bowling Green 22-19, and Alcorn State 28-21. It doesn't matter how much they're winning by, they're still winning. They have a bunch of studs on their team, and be on the lookout for Jalen Tolbert. 14 receptions, 317 yards. Hasn't scored a touchdown this season yet because they've only thrown 2, but they are studs. The Jaguars are winning the Sun Belt.
I love it. I mean, who else would talk about the Jaguars in the Sun Belt other than our very own Pete
You got to be
Wagon?
a degenerate gambler to know them.
Well, that's well said, and we just did our gambling section. So how about this matchup we got between two Midwest schools? Instead of doing a home and home, we're doing a neutral site. Interesting story. I recall vividly when this came out, the first game was supposed to be at Soldier Field.
Yep.
And Notre Dame was going to be the away team. It was weird because everyone's like, why would Notre Dame be the away team? And the following one would be at Lambeau, and Notre Dame would be the home team. That is why I believe this game is being played on Fox and not on NBC, even though it is technically now a Notre Dame home game. The reason I think they changed it is because of the missed COVID season, different calculations for home games, and this one just had to be designated a Notre Dame home game. I think Wisconsin also came out with their white jerseys, anticipating that being for Lambeau or whatever, so that they use that. Notre Dame goes with the dark, so it just makes more sense for Notre Dame to be the home team. But why else is it on Fox? I don't really know. Noon kickoff. I believe all of us absolutely hate that. Notre Dame's primetime, baby. We're the focus of the sport, and we're on the road. We're primetime. You put us where people are going to watch us. So it's an insult to our tradition and our culture. It's offensive as a Notre Dame fan to equate us with that Big Ten nonsense. That aside, Soldier Field, college game day, ranked matchup between 12 Notre Dame and I believe 18 Wisconsin.
Yep.
What are your early impressions of the Badgers this season? Obviously, with that early season loss to Penn State.
They suck.
Interesting.
There you go. So I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I hate Wisconsin. I'm going to tell you a story before I get into why. And this is going to be impartial. I'm going to tell you why I hate them. Then I'll be impartial with why I think they suck. So I played college football at a very small Division III school. I'm not the tallest. I wasn't the biggest. And my history teacher, who was also my football coach, sat me down in his office one day and said, "I don't think you should go play college football." And I said, "No, I'm going." He goes, "No, you should go to Wisconsin and study history." And I said, respectfully, no. I'm going to play college
Why did he
football.
want to send you to Wisconsin? You're not
Because
even
I was a
from
history.
there.
I was a history nerd, and yeah, he's wanted
Does
me to go
Wisconsin
from.
have the only history program
Apparently,
in the
they
United
have a
States?
wicked good history program. They also had a very racist rock that got removed from campus 2 years ago. But he wanted me to go from New York to Wisconsin, and I get it was a pipeline because a ton of kids from my high school went to Wisconsin. But the only relevant thing about them is their basketball team, and that the fact that they make their whole point of jumping around to House of Pain. Like, fuck them. So I didn't go to Wisconsin. I ended up going to a small school. I ended up winning a national championship in rugby instead of football, but that's why I hate them. So that's a little inside P Wagon's head.
Perfect. Now give us the impartial take.
Impartial take. You look at who they played. Wisconsin has Penn State and Eastern Michigan on their schedule. Their stats are fully inflated right now.
By the way, I just want to jump in for a second. They have a bye in week 4. Well, week 3 for week 4. Who puts a bye in mid-September? It feels almost personal at that point. It's like, when are we playing Notre Dame? All right, let's put the bye right before that.
Every team on the schedule. Yeah.
Every team on the schedule until we hit like Navy is on a bye before us.
Yeah,
so
ridiculous.
Anyway.
So you look at their defense. I think it's totally inflated numbers here. 15th in total yards, 210. 62nd in passing yards, 6th in rushing yards. Yeah, 33 a game. Good. I'm glad you have that. But that's Eastern Michigan. Penn State didn't have to run the ball because they threw it all over you.
Yeah,
Points.
that's how Penn State won,
11.5.
right?
Yeah, 11.5. You're in the fucking Big Ten. There's no points scored over there. They punt, they go 3 and out, and that's the game. And third down efficiency, 51st. So, yes, they're beating Notre Dame in almost every category. But Notre Dame is a much better team than the shit that they've seen from Wisconsin, or that Wisconsin have seen. Eastern Michigan. Let me just get into that one real quick. The mighty Eagles of Eastern Michigan, who they beat 34-7. Eastern Michigan beat the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Historically terrible. They beat them. They lost to Wisconsin, and they beat St. Francis. They haven't played anyone either.
Yeah.
Wisconsin has played shit schools. Penn State beat
Penn State's
them.
been good. They beat Auburn. I mean, there's some validity to losing that.
Yeah, but they can beat a good school, but then they can beat up on Eastern Michigan, who is a moderately terrible MAC school.
And they lost to Penn State at home, and while the defensive stats may have been impressive, Penn State won that game by airing it out, and that's where Wisconsin is vulnerable. Because you can look great defensively playing in the Big Ten, because you do what Michigan used to do with Don Brown. You play man-to-man coverage and you stack the box, and nobody's moving the ball on you.
Clifford went 18 for 33 for 247 yards and a touchdown. Eastern Michigan's quarterback, and I'm not a stat guy, and you know I'm mad when I'm bringing out the stats. They had 2 quarterbacks. One went 6 for 13 for 53 yards. Another one 4 for 7 for 23 yards. Why is Vegas saying Wisconsin's a 5.5 point favorite? Because they've played a good Penn State team and lost, and a bad Eastern Michigan team and won. It fundamentally does not make sense to me.
I think so. For those not aware, the line opened 6.5 Wisconsin, which is surprising because, I mean, during this preseason, it was pretty much a pick 'em. Like it was some for Notre Dame, some for Wisconsin. I think, and the line has moved down, so the market is betting it back down towards Notre Dame being a smaller underdog. I think the reason for that is more to do with Notre Dame than Wisconsin. I think Notre Dame was punished in the polls. Mind you, Ohio State wasn't for their loss, for their tight win. Clemson wasn't for barely beating Georgia Tech. Oklahoma wasn't punished. Just Notre Dame was punished for barely beating Toledo. Although, granted, Toledo goes out and loses the next week. So, I mean, there's justification for it. But Notre Dame has not looked good early. I think the Purdue game was different. But because Notre Dame has not been Notre Dame, people are thinking, oh, maybe what people had said about them this offseason was true. And there's just too much to replace. And they just really aren't good. And they're a paper tiger. And wait until they play someone good. The problem I have with that is roster for roster, Notre Dame is better. Notre Dame is a more talented team. I like Notre Dame's coaches more. It's going to be a Notre Dame crowd. I mean, this is Chicago. I mean, even in Green Bay, we'll probably have more fans there anyway. Because this is
Lambeau went to ND. People forget.
So I think Notre Dame is being disrespected here. We'll get into our predictions in a bit, but it is interesting because I don't think Wisconsin has done anything to earn 6.5, obviously now 5.5 on the Irish. Is that kind of where you think it's gone to?
Yeah, it should be a pick 'em. I mean, I have ND in teasers and straight up, and I teased them up to 12.5. Just at stealing money, and I got them straight up too. So you look at what Wisconsin has this year, and again, we're going back to player stats. Graham Mertz, 36 for 54, 326 yards, 2 interceptions, no passing touchdowns.
Okay? That's not good. And that includes Eastern Michigan.
That includes Eastern Michigan. You look at their rushing stats. Their player stats for rushing. They have 1 running back, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns. The majority of those came against Eastern Michigan. In that game, the player in question, I can't pronounce his name, so I'm not going to, he ran for 144 yards. So you figure he ran 144 there, and the rest of that what's it going to be, 120-something yards against Penn State. Those are mediocre rushing stats. They haven't seen a team who can pass the ball as well as ND can. I think Graham Mertz is a terrible quarterback, and Wisconsin fans will say, "Oh, Jack Cohn's a terrible quarterback." Fine,
they would like to have him right now.
But you would like to have him over Graham Mertz or Chase Wolf. So That's where I'm standing there. And Brian Kelly said, "Oh, Jack Cohn hasn't told us any hand signals. We're not big on that. All that stuff." That's maybe true. I'm not going to call the tied for winningest coach of all time a liar, but Jack knows some things. He's played against that defense before. Maybe not the exact defense, but he's played against some semblance of a first team defense. He knows where the strengths are. He knows where the weaknesses are. He's going to use that to his advantage. And if Tyler Buckner's healthy and his hamstring's fine, let him run on him a little bit. I think this 2 quarterback system is going to be deadly.
And I think it's going to play out too in this game. Interesting. While you were speaking there, I was looking up my favorite statistics for quarterback, which is, of course, quarterback rating. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I know you're not a stats guy, but you said everything that the stats show, and that is that Graham Mertz is not a good quarterback this season. His QBR out of 100 is 24.9. That's 111th in the country. That's not good at all. Jack Cohn's not having a great season. He's at 54.6, 72nd in the country. But, I mean, it's hard to when you're being sacked every 10 seconds. In fact, it's what held him back from being number 1 in week 1 against Florida State, because he was the number 1 passing quarterback. So we have the quarterback advantage. We've got 2 quarterbacks that are really good. They will have the offensive line advantage in this game, I believe. They will run the ball on us. They're going to, and we're going to struggle to run the ball on them. That's just how it's going to be. But I will take that deal any day of the week, because I know we can throw it on them. And if we can throw it on them, it's going to be ugly. Now, if it's torrential downpour and we can't even physically throw the ball and we can't run the ball like Michigan circa 2019, then yeah, we could get destroyed too. But I'm going to take the team that can throw the ball, and that's Notre Dame. So Irish-Wisconsin all-time, 8-6-2 for Notre Dame. They last played in 1964, where the Irish winning 31-17. Midwestern teams, it's a Big Ten team. Not too much history there. But look, both sides want to win this one, right? It's Notre Dame. It's your Super Bowl. It's a chance to win, no doubt. But for Notre Dame, it's a unusual opponent that's ranked in your second home. Notre Dame's played at Soldier Field many, many times, and they have a phenomenal record there. You kind of got to defend your territory, because Chicago is Notre Dame territory. You can't lose there. You got to win your recruiting battles there. You got to win your football games there. So I'm getting amped up, Steve. P. Take it away. Like, what do you got for me in this game?
Oh boy, do I ever. They're not going to be able to grow the grass on Soldier Field. Just to go a little history here, we talked about how I was a history major. 1928, Wisconsin and Notre Dame played each other. It was Knute Rockne versus Glenn Thistlethwaite. Thistlethwaite, doesn't matter what his name is. Coach Thistlethwaite wanted to slow down Notre Dame's rushing attack, so he grew the grass out, much like we would do against Reggie Bush in 2005. Knute Rockne was not happy. Knute Rockne demanded the grass be trimmed before the game. Thistlethwaite refused. Wisconsin won 22-6. I love being petty there, but the tall grass can't happen. Notre Dame will be a faster team defensively than Wisconsin and a middling team offensively. It's going to come down to special teams here. That's my theory. It's going to come down to field position, as every Big Ten team does. And it's going to come down to what we can do kicking, and maybe even pull off a return with Kyren Williams now being our returner. So,
see, my fear is that we turn into a Big Ten game. That's if you play Wisconsin's game, that's how you lose to them, right? If you get stuck in this run, try to throw punt, run, throw punt, that can get ugly. I think if you just dictate the tempo, kind of like a fight, right? If you just go in there and impose your rhythm the way you want to play, Wisconsin's not going to keep up with you. Our secondary has been surprisingly good. Our defense we know is good. And here's the thing. We said this last week. Notre Dame plays up and down to their opponents. They've always done that. We'll be 7-5 one year, and we'll take the number 1 team right to the brink, right? That year we played Nebraska, number 1 Nebraska, and we were awful, and we took them right to the wire, and we almost won. And then there will be years where we'll struggle to beat Toledo, right? Like, Notre Dame is Notre Dame for that reason. What we have to understand with this game is that they're going to play up for it, right? Wisconsin is a top-tier opponent. Notre Dame has been disrespected by both the odds makers and by fans and by the pollsters. It's a statement game. Coach Kelly gets his teams ready for statement games. It's in Chicago. The defense has been improving. The offensive line's been improving. I think a lot's going right at the right time. And it's, if nothing else, it's going to tell us what this team is. We're going to learn about Notre Dame. Notre Dame is either going to be a top 5 team, or they're going, and the critics will be right, and maybe Notre Dame isn't. We'll find out soon. And I'm putting my money on Notre Dame. I know we're biased, but I can reasonably come to that conclusion.
Notre Dame is 10-0-2 in games at Soldier Field. The last game they played there was 2012. Pretty good year. I don't know if you remember it. 41-3 routing of Miami. They've never lost a game at Soldier Field.
Is the 2 a tie or a loss? Because different people put them in different orders.
According to this research here that I just did as we were talking, the first game that they won was against Northwestern. They beat them 13-6.
Okay.
It looks like, yes, it does look like they are 10-0-2 win-loss draw.
That's excellent. Like I said, phenomenal record at Soldier Field. History there. It's going to be a good one. And I think if we can come out and not be shy and play them like we played Clemson in the first game, where we attacked Clemson, we have an advantage in the air. We just do. We got receivers. We got a good quarterback. We can get the ball out of the hands quick so the offensive line isn't in trouble. We can beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin is not an unstoppable team, and the game plan defensively that Notre Dame needs to enact, right? We know what Wisconsin is offensively, and I'll take the team that can throw the ball over the team that can run the ball any day of the week.
And Graham Mertz, again, is not a good quarterback. And if you look at his stats rushing-wise, so really with him, I'm pulling up his stats right now. If you get a little pressure on him, he's not going to be able to take it. So overall, just in general, his career, he's only completed, I'm trying to do this math quickly here. He's only completed 63% of his passes all time, 2019 through 2021. He's only thrown 9 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's not great. And rushing wise, this year he's negative 31 yards rushing. Overall, he's only had 13 yards. So if we get to him, our defense is going to tee off. He is exactly the same thing as Cone, just a little bit shorter, more immobile, and with a worse arm. All Wisconsin quarterbacks are the same. So you look at that, that's kind of where I stand there.
All right, let's wrap this one up, P. Nice and short for the week. Obviously, Steve's gone. You're getting married, so big congratulations to you as well.
Thank you.
Give me a score prediction. And Steve and I have been doing this lately. I'm sure you've listened. We will pick our scores ahead of the game, and we end up with essentially the same score. I've written mine down, and I don't know what you've got. So why don't you tell the folks at home how you're seeing this game, and we'll see if you and I are kind of got that voodoo going.
Let me see what the total is. Jesus. Do you have the total? The over-under?
I can have that very shortly for you.
I got it right here. So according to my app that I use, we have the over-under at 46.5, with Notre Dame being a 5.5-point dog. I'm going to go a little off the beaten path here because I talked about special teams. It's going to be Notre Dame 25, Wisconsin 21.
Okay, interesting. 25's a scoregami number right there.
They're going to get a safety in the end zone off a Jay Bramblett punt, and I'm going to be through the moon. And if I don't tweet it right away, I am going to be watching the game on delay.
I love it. I think this is a game Notre Dame is going to come up for. They're going to get ready for it. I think it's a game where Notre Dame will have an opportunity to blow them out. And I think if Notre Dame wanted to and really execute it the way they could, this could be a blowout. It's not going to be. I don't see it being a blowout. I see it being a close game. I think we will play up to them, but within the game we'll play down to them because I think we'll have chances to put it away. I have the Irish winning 31-24, 7-point game, close, but it'll be very victorious. You'll feel great at the end, and Notre Dame will get back into the conversation for where they belong. I just don't think Wisconsin's got the dynamic type of team to beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame loses to one type of team, and that is an all-time great team. That is Alabama, that is Clemson, that would be in Ohio State. Notre Dame does not lose to teams that can only do one thing. And I think that's going to continue. I think they're going to give a good show for the fans, and I think the Irish will once again come out on top.
Yeah, I think that is the general consensus there. I did get a wire into Steve, and Steve has his final score as, drumroll, 23-13.
Interesting. Okay. All of us picking close game. I'd love to see myself be wrong, not in the winner, but in the size margin. But I think that's it. Pete, do you have anything else before we break here?
Be nice to each other on Twitter. I know that we can sometimes yell at each other, but again, we're just three guys with a Twitter account that like to talk about Notre Dame football. We're not professionals. None of us went to journalism school. Just be nice to each other, and that's all I got this week.
Awesome. I love it. It's a positive message. It was my birthday last week, by the way, so that was the most important thing any of the horsemen did, because Steve didn't get married. No, of course he did. So we wish him the best, Mr. and Mrs. whatever
Steve.
Their last name is. Yeah, Steve. We don't want to give anything away. Very happy for those folks. Very happy for you. You're getting married. So you know what? Rate us. Give us a 5-star review. Leave a nice little comment. Maybe even congratulate someone on getting married. We appreciate it. We appreciate listener support if you reach out that way. And we're looking forward to yet another week of Notre Dame football. And we look forward to having you guys next week when we get to bloat and gloat about a big Notre Dame victory. Go Irish.
Go Irish.